Another question I'm often asked. Well, look, you talked about Noah's Ark there, but is there any evidence for a global flood? You know, one of the things that I say to people is this: if there really was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. By the way, do you know what we find? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. When I go to the Grand Canyon, I've been there with a park ranger, and you look down and you see all those rock layers and the fossils in the rock layers, and you see the big canyon there. I've stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon with a park ranger who said, "Do you realize a long time and a little bit of water did this?" I stood there and said, "Do you realize a lot of water and a little bit of time did this?" You see, because I believe the layers were laid down by the flood, and the canyon was carved out probably at the end of the flood or after the flood. And of course, the park ranger would say, "Oh no, these layers were laid down over millions of years. It takes millions of years to lay down lots of layers." Well, no, that's not true.
Before the famous eruption at Mount St. Helens, scientists were mostly familiar with slow-acting examples of geologic change. But at Mount St. Helens, geologists watched the Earth's surface change quite rapidly. Icebergs were buried in hot avalanche material. They melted and formed badlands in days. Eruptions on May 18 and June 10 produced fine layers in hours. On June 10, mud flows cut zigzag canyons 100 feet deep in soft sand and mud, complete with perpendicular side canyons. Canyons that are reminiscent of the geography of Grand Canyon, only 40 times smaller and clearly produced within hours. Fallen trees formed a log mat on the surface of Spirit Lake and dropped bark to the bottom of the lake, accumulating up to 3 feet of bark peat in just a couple years. And vertically floating logs sinking to the bottom of the lake resulted in buried trees in only a decade, similar to the trees of Yellowstone's fossil forest, which are also buried in volcanic layers. Even though Mount St. Helens is a very small catastrophe compared to the flood or the major catastrophes immediately following the flood, it provides a better clue to what happened in those times than the slow geologic processes which are most commonly seen in the present. The Earth's surface is scarred by deep canyons, cut into solid rock. But how did they form? A little bit of water over a long time, or a little bit of time with a lot of water? Modern rivers don't generally cut downward into solid rock, so today's river erosion seems incapable of explaining rock canyons. The Great Flood of the Bible, however, provides a possible explanation for such canyons. In soft mud or sand in your own backyard, you can see the power of heavy rains on a small scale. A rainstorm can create miniature canyons in only minutes. Though these canyons are very small, cut into mud, they share many of the same characteristics as the world's Great Canyons. On a larger scale, mud flows have also been observed to form these features quickly. At Mount St. Helens, a single mud flow off the mountain carved Engineer's Canyon out of soft sediment in a single day, 100 feet deep. And the same thing even happened in solid rock. A series of mud flows created Lewitt and Step canyons on the front face of Mount St. Helens, cutting hundreds of feet into solid rock over just a few years. We observe canyons being cut into rock today, but only by catastrophic processes. Just imagine how easy it would be to cut massive canyons during and after Noah's flood. Torrential water and mud flows, followed by uplift and heavy rains, created the right conditions to produce the world's canyons. Furthermore, it may have been easier when flood sediments had not fully hardened. Grand Canyon is a good example where we find evidence of catastrophic forces at work. Upstream is evidence of huge lakes. These lakes would never have formed if the canyon were already open below them. However, if these lakes had formed from rains after Noah's flood, and if the pressure of these waters broke through and carved through the recently deposited sediments, then we would expect to find surge deposits downstream. Below Grand Canyon, this is precisely what we find: evidence of a lot of water cutting over a little bit of time.
take millions of years to form canyons, and it doesn't take millions of years to form fossils. At the Creation Museum, for instance, we have a fossil of a fish that was fossilized while it was eating another fish. That didn't happen over millions of years, did it? It obviously was covered very, very quickly, and there's lots of examples of that sort of thing. Also, it doesn't take millions of years to petrify wood. Here's an interesting quote from a secular source. A few years ago, researchers at a national science laboratory in south central Washington found a way to achieve in days what takes Mother Nature millions of years, converting wood to mineral. In other words, to petrify wood. And we read a statement like that, but I think many people don't think it's true.